So with all the characters starting out with different skills in the game, it can be pretty tricky to know which one to choose. So let's look into them all and see what skills they have and which ones are actually perhaps more easier to play and which ones are perhaps more trickier. So let's start with the Mercenary. The Mercenary is probably the most beginner-friendly character you can play in the game. And the reason why is his abilities. So depending on what you choose to start with, he can either learn lockpicking or steal. And if you learned lockpicking, then you can open up certain doors in the dungeons, leading to places where you'd normally need a key or red vial. Or if you learn steal, then you can steal some really valuable items from enemies in the game. And just to note, when you do get the option in the intro to either become a pickpocketer or a burglar or lead an honest life, you probably wouldn't want to choose lead an honest life because you only actually get the silver coins from choosing that option. And that really isn't something that is significant when you're playing this game. There's always a chance that you'll find silver coins while you're looting things around the dungeon anyway. Then one of his other skills he can learn is escape plan, and such a valuable ability. You've got a higher chance to run away from enemies. It will work on every enemy as some just won't allow you to escape, for example the bosses, or there's some other enemies around the dungeon that you can't escape from, but it's around a 90% chance that you will be successful when you use escape plan. So all in all, Kahara, the mercenary, is probably the best character for beginners in the game. His abilities make him stand out at the start. It's also a very easy all-round character to use if you want to avoid a lot of fights rather than go head in and battle your way out. Plus you can get a lot of loot with his abilities early on compared to the other characters in the game. Now with the knight, she's an excellent all-round type of player. She's very durable in combat. So she can either learn defense stance, which gives an evasion buff and perfect guard, or fast stance, which in most cases gives you an extra turn in battle. Both are okay skills to have, so really it's a matter of choice. The other thing is that she can either get a sword or spear when you choose her. And depending on your choice, you'll get different types of armor. You'll either get the arm guards or the leg guards. And it doesn't really matter so much about the armor because you're probably going to loot that again further on into the game. So it's really a matter of preference and which type of weapon you prefer your character to use. So with the knight, her abilities make her an all-round balanced player. She has good combat and survivability compared to the other characters. So really she's a viable option for beginners. Enki, the Dark Priest, is a little more harder, in my opinion. He starts off a lot more weaker than his comrades. He's more like a slow burn because he starts off weak, but later on in the game he can become extremely powerful once he learns more spells. So to start off with his skills, he can learn necromancy, can bring enemies back from the dead, but really this is only skeletons or ghouls, and you don't get control over them in battle, so they attack on their own, but they will attack every turn, and they become your permanent allies once you use necromancy on them, so you will have to be careful with that if you do actually want to recruit other allies further on in the game. The other thing he can learn is mastery over insects, and basically this gives you the ability to talk to insects while walking around the dungeon, so you may see them jump around and then hop into the bush if you're in the courtyard, for example, and then you can go over and talk to them. They do give items. There's also a quest line associated with the insects as well. So that is the plus side of having that skill. The other thing he can learn is pyromancy, and that's basically just a simple fire magic spell. He'll always start off with counter magic, which is a good skill to have because he can open up the doors where you'll need to use the purifying talisman. He can also counter summon magic from enemies. He is weaker than the other characters though because he can't equip certain weapons, and he is obviously wearing cloth items over the leather that the mercenary gets or the plate that the knight gets equipped. So that does make him more vulnerable to attacks. So he is a lot more squishier than the other characters at the start, but as I say, as you go along, he becomes a lot more powerful and learns a lot more spells. He's probably not as beginner friendly as the mercenary and the knight, a little bit more harder to learn than them two. So that's something to keep in mind. And lastly, the Outlander, which I find the most hardest to use in the game. He is definitely not a beginner friendly type of character. So firstly, he can learn Devour, which is an ability where you can consume the flesh of certain enemies after you've killed them. Now, this may sound good because it obviously restores your hunger, but the problem with it is that after you kill them, you click the enemy and you are prompted with would you like to devour them, and you can press yes or no. Sometimes if you accidentally click it too fast, you will devour them and then lose item that the enemy was holding. So you have to be incredibly careful with this one because it does happen. You didn't want to devour them, you wanted to search them first, but you accidentally click the devour. And then the other skill he can learn is Bloodlust, and that raises your attack by 50% for 3 turns, but it also means that you won't have control of him anymore. He will just go into a sort of rage and attack on his own free will, which can be beneficial, yes, but the problem is when an enemy attacks you, it can be removed, so you lose Bloodlust. And the chances of that happening are pretty high, so you'll find that you frequently lose Bloodlust when you've applied it, and then effectively you've wasted that whole turn, making it a really bad skill to have. The other thing he can get is either bows or axes. Now, the bows are probably the only thing he has that is an advantage over the other characters in the game, because with the bows you can shoot from afar and attack enemies before even initiating a battle with them. So you can take down their health before even starting. Or you can just choose the axes for the Outlander if that's what you prefer. So the Outlander, he starts off with higher damage than the other characters, but the abilities he starts out with make him a poorer choice. Really, he is combat heavy, so if you do prefer more combat in the game, then he may be a good choice, but it's still risky in Fear and Hunger. I wouldn't advise to choose him if you are a beginner player due to his bad abilities that he starts out with. I would choose one of the other characters, but if you do enjoy that more offensive play, then go ahead. That's it for the characters. Personally, I prefer to choose the knight when I'm playing. I think she's all round balanced and she does have some good start out abilities. And my second choice is usually always a mercenary just because he has the escape plan and can also start out with the steal ability. Anyway, that's all and I hope it helps.